Well, g'day guys, welcome back. Too many projects, not enough time. I'm Andrew. Here we are again in the shop with Ivy. So, part of getting her to run, we took the gearbox back out, just in case there was some sort of drag or something going on with all this setup. And there wasn't really, although we did notice, which I mentioned before, a slight clearance issue on the inside of the bell housing here, like literally a 1/16, so I took just a hair out of in here. That cleared that tolerance problem up. The other one was the clutch fork. Now the back of the pressure plate housing was rubbing on the clutch fork. Now I thought it was just barely touching. I think it was a little more pressure than just barely touching. I've had this apart and back together. I've tried to manipulate the clutch fork, which I have, making a little more divot room, because if it was just a minor deflection that we were having, or clearance issue, I raised the dimple in the middle there, which the pivot ball goes into to try and get this to set back a hair. I compressed with the press a little bit right on the pressure point where it touched to try and clear it again. But then when I put it all back together, I put a straight edge across the front of the throwout bearing out to where we were touching here, and I managed to get across that flat plane from basically the throwout bearing out across to where we were touching here. About a 1/4 inch space, which I thought, okay, so we've got about an extra 1/8 of an inch after doing those little things. Maybe that's all we need, although it'd be nice to have a little more. And then I went and basically took standoff dimensions off the front of the fingers of the pressure plate out to the face of the housing where it's touching the fork. So the clearance between these two is about a 1/4 inch, but the clearance between the fingers and the outer housing was way more than 1/4 inch. So I think it's still going to touch. So I'm going to do all these next steps off camera and keep you updated, because really we're just putting the gearbox in, checking for clearances and whatever, and pulling it back out again. So the gearbox has got to come in and out a few more times here to check all this. Now, I can't remember exactly all the clearances I checked when setting out the throwout bearing. I believe I did everything correctly. So I'm going to put the gearbox in one more time and check to make sure I've got that 1/8 of an inch gap between the clutch fingers, pressure plate fingers, and the face of the throwout bearing. Just in case I got that all wrong and I actually have way more room between the two, which would actually help if we did. So I'm kind of hoping I screwed up there. But I'm going to, next step, put it in. I'll take a look, see how much clearance we got, and then that'll help me make the next decision as to which way we go from there. The other option is to get a less chunky pressure plate, Land Rover pressure plate, or modify the fork some more to go around all of that. Anyway, I'm going to put it back in. I'll be right back. I'll let you guys know what I found out. Oh, and in the last week I have been really busy. I've actually been fabric cobbling together a barbecue, for better terms, for keeping in the back of the 101 for camping and exploring in the 101, and that's come together very nicely. I'm going to have that video out of basically how I assembled that, coming out of my other channel, sorry, Tinny. So I will keep you updated when that's there, or go over to Camp Cracker Tinny, subscribe, follow notification, and see that when that comes out. That's going to be all my exploring. I've also put the gaskets in behind the exhaust manifolds. What else have I done? A whole bunch of little things. Starting to put the fenders together and test all that to figure out what I need to do for all that. So I've been doing lots of little peripheral stuff. I got a new heater in, we'll cover that. Trying to find a good heater that's compact. My battery's about to go flat, so I'll be right back with you. Okay guys, so I just had the gearbox back in there and climbed underneath. I definitely have a full 1/8 of an inch play with the throwout bearing between the surface of this and the fingers of the pressure plate, which is okay. I think I gotta resettle this up. Part of the problem with the angle of the fork is this is an adjustable throwout bearing. So the slot where the fork rests in, with it being adjustable, goes forwards and backwards. So it's adjusted a fair way out right now. But I already have a 1/4 inch spacer made up to take some of that up. But I think what I'm going to do is get another 1/4 inch spacer made up. No use doing a 1/2 inch one. Well, I guess we could, but either I get a 1/2 inch one made up or a 1/4 inch one made up. Take the overall thickness and reduce this gap in here. Bring this forwards 1/4 inch, which hopefully the angle of the dangle around the pivot point ball, which I might also look to see if I can find a new pivot ball. If I can find a 7/16 pivot ball, 7/16 fine clutch fork pivot ball, then I can adjust that in further, which will bring that further away from the casing of the pressure plate as well. So I'm going to do a little research, fabric cobble some stuff, machine some stuff up to adjust this. I may need to, I got to go get some more these little guys, brain fart, sorry. Okay guys, so let me make this a little more clear exactly what I'm trying to achieve here. Let me draw you a diagram on an Amazon box that I opened earlier. Alright, so throwout bearing. Now I've modified, changed the settings on this. This is an adjustable one. If you can quite see it here, I just trimmed this off because it stuck out too far after I adjusted it. Basically this portion here screws into this portion, so you can set the depth between your gearbox then you got your shaft. I'm just going to keep it simple, not to scale. Alright, so basically so you've got between this and then eventually your pressure plate fingers will be pressure plate fingers there, and then the rest of your clutch and gubbins. So in between your pressure plate fingers here and the face of your gearbox here, you need the throwout bearing, which goes back and forth. When your foot's off the clutch, it's back pressed against the gearbox. When you put your foot on the clutch, it pushes, and then it pushes the fingers. Then this spins with the fingers on the pressure plate, but this stays stationary on this shaft, and that's how you pressure clutch in and out on the fingers there. So how I had this before, I had this screwed most of the way out, in a previous shot, I'll see if I can go back in the video and cut that shot, put it in here. This was back here, and you could see probably 3/8 of an inch of threads in between this portion and the bearing here. So what that did for me, so then you got your, on your gearbox, you've got a pivot ball that your clutch fork goes on here, mounts over your pivot ball, comes out here, and then you've got your slave cylinder either on this side like I have, and my slave cylinder is going to pull instead of push, so it's backwards to most all vehicles. It's a pulling slave cylinder instead of a push, but most slave cylinders, it's probably mounted out here, not to scale. Your slave cylinder, when you push your foot on the clutch, will push this arm back, pivoting your clutch fork, pushing your throwout bearing onto the clutch. That's kind of how it happens and works. So with this mounted the way I had it, I had this small spacer behind to make up the difference what I couldn't wind this out to take up this space. And then so then I had a big pile of 3/8 worth of threads exposed here, and all this was further back. Now putting this further back basically puts your clutch fork further back here, with this end pointing forwards, which then, as I not to scale, was causing my clutch fork actually to hit this portion of your pressure plate. The casting or the body out here was hitting on my fork. Let me grab the fork. Okay, so here's the fork, and this back edge was hitting, as you can see the rub marks here, right along here, and pushing back. So basically that was engaging the clutch because there wasn't enough room to make it all fit. So in order to bring this forwards around that pivot ball to give me more room for this not to hit here, I've wound this all the way in, up tight against the back of the throwout bearing, and then through the wonderful engineering of a friend of mine, we're replacing this little thin one with this thicker one, so that will back up as my spacer behind there, which then basically moves the clutch fork from back here to up here. Moves it from back here where it was up to here, and on that pivot brings this further back away from this edge here. Now after some really quick preliminary measurements, I've got like a bee's dick between here and here right now on basic measurements. So the next step is put this all back together, shove it in the truck, and let's see if it clears and what happens. Now I've massaged this a lot. When I first got it, I had to grind out a bunch here for clearances on the bell housing. Since then I've squished these bits to fit through the bell housing. I have tried to squish this to create an indentation so that that will pass by here with a little indentation, as well as I've tried to push out this pivot point in here. I've tried to push that deeper to move it back as well. Now I don't believe that this really changes a lot of stuff. It's just a fork, so it's not going to affect how any of this works. It's just a pivot point. We're just adjusting the pivot points to get more clearance. So that's where we're at. Alright guys, here we are looking up our skirt from underneath. So it looks like we're going to be good. So up just here you can see we've got 1/4 inch clearance. between this face here, or that face there, and the clutch fork. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. And ultimately, if I can catch this, we have a fat 1/16 of play there, which is perfect because the throwout bearing manufacturer calls for between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of play, and we've got about a fat 1/16 in there, so I think we have the problem solved. Actually, I've got, at least from the angle I can see, it's hard. I've probably got 3/8 of an inch. 3/8 of an inch between the fork and the housing of the pressure plate. So that is a win. Winner, winner, palmy chicken dinner. Alright, now I'm going to jump out, grab the start button, disconnect the coil, and turn it over to see if we got a wobble in the flywheel. There was a slight indicator of that before, so I'm going to do that, and then if I see something I'll show you. If I don't, then we'll see you topside. Take it again. Okay guys, so I grabbed the starter button, disconnected the coil, turned it over, and I put my finger on as we turned it over. I can feel no deflection or wobble in the flywheel. That is excellent. So we've got 3/8 of an inch clearance on the fork, which I just said before, going over it again. And everything seems to be clearanced and working good. Awesome. So when I first put it in, did the other video where I was assembling it all, I just assumed that there was going to be no clearance issues, and I didn't look for any. And at the time I didn't even turn the engine over. I just see what happens when you assume, or better, not assume necessarily, because it doesn't affect you or make an ass out of you. But so I guess it's assume, so there's no you in it. Anyway, I assumed that all the clearances and everything would just pop together and work. Then when I started to turn it over, I noticed I had a couple of clearances. First one was easy, little die grind in the previous video. This one actually wasn't that hard either. I just had, as I explained before, just had to move where the fork fitted into the throwout bearing. I just had to screw that adjustable portion all the way in, make a custom spacer for behind it, and that angled the fork just enough where I got tons of clearance now. So that worked out perfect. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you've enjoyed the video enough to continue following me. You know what to do for all that, and we'd love to see you next time on the next adventures of Andrew and Ivy. Too many projects, not enough time. And see what we do tomorrow night. See you then.